35 countries recognized Somaliland in 1960. Then they all forgot. This is where 12% of global trade passes and where 5 powers are now competing for control. Ethiopia is landlocked and desperate for port access. China, the UAE, Turkey, Israel all want in. And right in the middle, a functioning democracy with its own government, currency, and borders that the world pretends doesn't exist. In December 2025, Israel became the first UN member to formally recognize Somaliland. Somalia called it an attack. The African Union rejected it within hours. I went to the documents. The 1960 treaty that was never signed, the 1963 court ruling, the African Union's own investigation they've been ignoring for 20 years. And here's what I found, and why both narratives get this wrong. Britain controlled the Somaliland Protectorate from 1884, a separate colony with its own borders. By 1960, decolonization was sweeping Africa. On June 26, 1960, the Somaliland Order in Council came into effect. Reading directly from the Act, the territories known as the Somaliland Protectorate shall become an independent country on the 26th day of June 1960. Not a promise, not a transition, independence. Within hours the telegrams arrived. China's foreign minister sent congratulations before independence even took effect, on June 25th. The US followed on June 26th. The Soviet Union, Britain, France, Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Israel, more than 35 states extended formal recognition through bilateral agreements, establishing de jure statehood. Somaliland existed as an independent, recognized state for 5 days. Then came July 1st. The plan was unification. British Somaliland in the north, Italian Somalia in the south. Same ethnic group, 2 colonies, 1 new republic. On July 1st, 1960, Italian Somalia gained independence. The same day, both territories declared themselves unified. But here's where the legal problem begins. Somaliland passed the Union of Somaliland and Somalia law on June 27. Somalia passed the Atto di Unione on June 30th. 2 different parliaments, 2 laws, 1 union. Except they weren't the same law. Eugene Contran was a legal scholar who examined the union documents while they were still fresh. Reading from his analysis, the Union of Somaliland and Somalia law and the Somalia Act of Union were both drafted in the form of bilateral agreements, but neither of them was signed by the representatives of the 2 territories. It gets worse. The Somalia Act of Union was approved in principle, but never enacted into law. Somalia's parliament even passed a resolution requesting a definitive single text of the Act of Union to be submitted to the National Assembly for approval. That text was never created. This isn't academic. It was tested in court. In 1963, a British judge named Hazelwood ruled, in the absence of an Act of Union, the court had no jurisdiction over Somaliland. Somalia did try to fix this. On January 31st, 1961, Law No. 5 attempted to retroactively validate the union. Contran's analysis again. The Act of Union deemed to have come into effect on July 1960. Deemed. Retroactive legislation curing a void agreement. Whether you can retroactively fix a defect this fundamental, scholars disagree. But the defect itself isn't disputed. So how does Somalia defend the union built on paperwork that doesn't exist? Let me present Somalia's side fairly. The strongest version of this argument matters. First, the union was voluntary. Northerners can in no way claim that the 1960 merger was a shotgun wedding. By all accounts, unification was wildly popular. That is true. There were celebrations. Pan-Somali nationalism was the dominant force. This wasn't conquest. Second, the international community recognized the union. A full union had in fact been effected by the will of the peoples, and such union was recognized by the international community. The UN admitted the Somali Republic on September 20th, 1960. every nation accepted the unified state. Third, 31 years of practice. The state continued to exist as a single national entity for more than 2 decades, regardless of any legal shortcomings. These are legitimate arguments, and they're why this case is harder than either side admits. The question is whether practice and recognition can cure a treaty defect this fundamental. The Somali Republic didn't just fail, it imploded. By 1991, the Siad Barre regime had collapsed. The south descended into warlord chaos. The north, former British Somaliland, took a different path. On May 18, 1991, elders gathered in Burao. Their declaration was carefully worded. The country previously known as Somaliland has restored its independence. Not declared, restored. That framing matters. James Crawford, the most cited scholar on statehood, defines secession as the creation of a state by the use of force without the consent of the former sovereign. Somaliland's argument: they're not seceding, they're restoring sovereignty that existed on June 26, 1960, from a union that was never legally completed. And there's precedent. In the 1990s, the Baltic states didn't declare independence. They restored it. Recovery of sovereignty suppressed in 1940. The international community accepted that framing because they'd never recognized the suppression as legal. But there's a key difference. The world never recognized the 1940 Soviet annexation as legal. The 1960 Somali Union was recognized for 31 years. Whether that difference is fatal depends on who's deciding. And for 20 years, the African Union has been the one deciding. Remember that investigation I mentioned? In April 2005, the AU sent a fact-finding mission to Somaliland. Their conclusion: the fact that the union between Somaliland and Somalia was never ratified makes Somaliland's search for recognition historically unique and self-justified in African political history. That is not my interpretation. That's the AU's own fact-finding mission. But there's more. Objectively viewed, the case should not be linked to the notion of opening a Pandora's box. The AU distinguished Somaliland from other secessionist movements. Unlike Biafra or Katanga, regions breaking from their original colonial unit, Somaliland is a complete colonial unit, leaving a failed merger. Their recommendation: the AU should find a special method of dealing with this outstanding case. That was 20 years ago. No special method was ever found, and no action was ever taken. Here's the irony. In the Constitutive Act of the African Union of 2000, we see in the Principles section, respect of borders existing on achievement of independence. But Somaliland's borders are the colonial borders. By refusing to recognize those borders, the AU is arguably violating its own doctrine. Ethiopia broke the logjam in January 2024. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called Red Sea access an existential question. Reliance on Djibouti's port was expensive and risky. The deal was this: Ethiopia leases a port at Berbera for 50 years. In exchange, Ethiopia agreed to an in-depth assessment towards recognition. Not a guarantee, but the clearest signal yet from a major African power. Then Israel went further. Prime Minister Netanyahu announced a full diplomatic recognition, including the exchange of ambassadors and the opening of embassies. Israel, the first UN member to formally recognize Somaliland in 34 years. Somalia called it an attack on sovereignty. Within hours, the African Union responded by firmly rejecting any initiative aimed at recognizing Somaliland. The same union that called the case unique and self-justified now calls recognition a dangerous precedent. So what's happening here? Somaliland isn't trying to become independent. They're arguing they already were, for 5 days in 1960, recognized by 35 nations, before a union that was never properly ratified. The documents support this. The 1963 ruling supports this. The African Union's own investigation called it unique and self-justified. That first narrative, Somaliland is just a separatist region with no legal basis, The 1960 independence, the 35 recognitions, the never ratified treaty, the 2005 report that undercuts it. But the second narrative, Somaliland was never part of Somalia, the 31 years of practice, the international recognition, and the voluntary merger, that complicates it. The legal case is stronger than most people realize. The political obstacles are real. The African Union fears that recognition would spur more secessionist cases. South Sudan is the only modern African secession, and that required parent-state consent. Somalia will never consent. Which means the international community has to decide. Does documentary evidence trump political convenience? Somaliland is not merely de facto, it is de jure, by virtue of its independence on June 26, 1960. The failure to acknowledge this is not ambiguity, it is a political choice. Israel just made that choice impossible to ignore. The documents exist, the precedents exist, the AU's own investigation called it unique and self-justified. The only thing missing is the political will to read them. If you want to understand how colonial decisions still shape modern conflicts, please subscribe.